The blood-soaked handkerchief trembled in Hannah Cooper's hand as the stage lurched over another rut in the road, sending her prized blue calico dress tumbling from her lap onto the dusty floorboards of the coach, needle and thread still dangling from its tattered hem. Hannah scrambled to retrieve it before the three other passengers could trample it underfoot. It was 1876, and the California-bound stagecoach had been traveling for 6 grueling days since departing from Santa Fe. Her clothing options were limited to what she could fit in one modest trunk, and this particular dress, though increasingly worse for wear, was her most presentable option. "Careful there, miss," said an elderly gentleman seated across from her, his weathered face creasing with concern as Hannah winced, her finger pricked once more by the needle. "These roads ain't kind to delicate work." Hannah offered a tight smile in return. "I haven't much choice, sir. I'll be arriving in Ventura with little more than my reputation and appearances matter." She didn't add that the blue calico was the last thing her mother had sewn for her before succumbing to consumption 2 winters ago. As the stagecoach continued westward, Hannah returned to her mending, fingers working mechanically as her mind drifted to the uncertainty awaiting her. At 22, she had exhausted her options back home in Missouri after her parents' passing left her with nothing but debts. The teaching position in Ventura, California, offered by her father's distant cousin, seemed a godsend, though she'd never met the woman nor traveled so far alone. The sound of hoofbeats approaching from behind the stagecoach pulled Hannah from her thoughts. The driver shouted something unintelligible, followed by the crack of his whip as the coach lurched forward with sudden speed. "Road agents," muttered the elderly man, his face paling as he clutched his walking stick tighter. Hannah's heart hammered in her chest as the stagecoach careened around a bend, her mending forgotten as she gripped the leather strap hanging from the ceiling. The riders were gaining, their shouts becoming clearer with each passing second. A shot rang out, followed by the driver's agonized cry. The stagecoach swerved violently, throwing Hannah against the door before the vehicle tilted precariously, and then crashed onto its side with a deafening splintering of wood. Hannah's world went black. When consciousness returned, it arrived with the sting of dust in her lungs and the copper taste of blood in her mouth. Hannah blinked slowly, attempting to orient herself amid the wreckage of the overturned stagecoach. Sunlight streamed through cracks in the broken wood, illuminating floating particles of dust and the still forms of her fellow passengers. Distant hoofbeats receded into silence. The bandits, having taken what they wanted, had apparently fled. With trembling arms, Hannah pushed herself upright, ignoring the sharp pain in her side. The elderly man who had spoken kindly to her lay motionless, his eyes staring blankly at nothing. The other passengers weren't moving either. Fighting back tears, Hannah crawled through the shattered door frame of the coach, emerging into the harsh sunlight of the desert landscape. The driver and shotgun messenger were nowhere to be seen, likely thrown from their perch during the crash or taken down by the bandits' bullets. Hannah struggled to her feet, scanning the horizon for any sign of life or civilization. Nothing but scrubland and distant mountains greeted her. Stumbling back to the coach, she retrieved her trunk, which had burst open in the crash, and gathered what belongings she could salvage, including the blue calico dress, now ripped in several new places. The nearest town, according to her recollection of the route, was still at least 15 miles west. With no other choice, Hannah gathered her strength, clutched her meager belongings to her chest, and began walking. The unforgiving sun beat down as Hannah trudged westward, her bonnet offering scant protection from the heat. By midday, her lips were cracked, and her vision swam with the shimmering mirages of the desert. Her side ached where she suspected a rib might be cracked, and her once neat blonde hair hung in sweaty tendrils around her face. Just as her strength began to fail, the sound of approaching hoofbeats reached her ears. Hannah froze, terrified the road agents had returned to eliminate any witnesses. With nowhere to hide in the open landscape, she stood rooted to the spot as a lone rider appeared on the horizon. As the rider drew closer, Hannah could make out a tall figure atop a powerful chestnut stallion. Unlike the frenzied approach of the bandits, this horseman maintained a steady pace, seemingly in no hurry. The broad brim of his hat obscured his features until he was nearly upon her. "Madam," the deep voice acknowledged her as the rider reined his horse to a stop several paces away. "You're a fair way from anywhere out here." Hannah swallowed hard, finding her voice despite her parched throat. "The stagecoach was attacked, back there." She gestured weakly behind her. "I'm the only survivor, I think." The rider pushed his hat back, revealing a sun-bronzed face with piercing blue eyes that assessed her condition with a single sweep. He couldn't have been more than 30, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble and shoulders that spoke of a lifetime of physical labor. "Samuel Everett," he introduced himself, dismounting in one fluid motion. "Most folks just call me Sam." "Hannah Cooper," she replied, swaying slightly as relief and exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. Sam moved forward quickly, catching her arm before she could collapse. "Whoa there, Miss Cooper. Let's get you some water." He guided her to a rock where she could sit, then retrieved a canteen from his saddlebag. "Drink slowly," he advised as he handed it to her. "Too much at once will make you sick." Hannah nodded gratefully, taking careful sips of the lukewarm water. As her head cleared, she became acutely aware of her bedraggled appearance, torn dress, dust-covered skin, and blood-matted hair. What a first impression to make on the first kind face she'd encountered in this wilderness. "Were you headed to Ventura?" Sam asked, squinting in the direction she had been walking. Hannah nodded. "I've accepted a teaching position there." "That's still nearly 40 miles west," Sam said with a frown. "You'd never have made it on foot in this heat." The reality of her situation struck Hannah anew, and tears threatened despite her efforts to remain composed. "I don't have many options, Mr. Everett." Sam studied her for a moment, then seemed to reach a decision. "My ranch is about 5 miles east of here. You can rest there, clean up, and I'll take you to Ventura in the wagon tomorrow." Hannah hesitated, years of cautious upbringing warning her about accepting help from strange men. Yet what choice did she have? Death in the desert seemed the only alternative. "I appreciate your kindness," she finally said, gathering what remained of her dignity. "If it's not too much trouble." Sam's mouth quirked in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "No trouble, Miss Cooper. Can you ride?" Hannah eyed the tall stallion with trepidation. "It's been some time, but yes." Sam nodded and gathered her salvaged belongings, securing them to his saddle. Then, with surprising gentleness for a man of his size, he helped her mount before swinging up behind her. "Lean back if you need to," he said, his voice close to her ear as he reached around her for the reins. "It's not a long ride, but I don't want you falling off." As the horse set off at an easy lope, Hannah found herself increasingly aware of the solid warmth of the cowboy behind her, his arms a steady presence on either side as he held the reins. Despite the impropriety of their position, she was too exhausted to maintain perfect posture and eventually allowed herself to relax slightly against his chest. "What brings you out this way, Mr. Everett?" she asked, trying to distract herself from their proximity and the rhythmic motion of the horse. "Sam," he corrected. "I was tracking some strays. Got a small spread about 10 miles outside of Ventura. Nothing fancy, but it's mine." His voice carried a note of pride that resonated with Hannah. To own something, to have built a life of one's own making, it was what she hoped to achieve in her new position. "And you?" Sam asked. "Teaching's what brings you to Ventura, but what brings you all the way from?" He paused. "Missouri," Hannah supplied. "And necessity, I suppose." "My parents passed. The farm was sold to cover debts, and Mrs. Abigail Fletcher, my father's cousin, offered the teaching position." Sam made a thoughtful sound but didn't press for more details, for which Hannah was grateful. As they crested a small rise, a modest ranch came into view. A single-story house constructed of sturdy timber sat centered on the property, with a barn and corral off to one side. It wasn't large or grand, but even from a distance, Hannah could see it was well maintained. "Home," Sam said simply as they approached. A weathered older man emerged from the barn as they rode into the yard, eyebrows rising at the sight of Hannah. "Hank," Sam called out, "we've got a guest. Miss Cooper survived a stagecoach robbery about 10 miles west. She'll be staying the night before I take her to Ventura tomorrow." Hank, who Hannah would later learn was Sam's foreman and had been with him since the ranch's beginning, merely nodded and took the reins as Sam dismounted. Sam reached up to help Hannah down, his hands strong and steady at her waist as she slid from the saddle. Her legs, unaccustomed to riding and weak from her ordeal, buckled slightly, and Sam's grip tightened to keep her upright. "Easy," he murmured, concern evident in his expression as he noted the pallor of her skin. "Let's get you inside." The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly neat for a bachelor's dwelling, with simple but sturdy furniture and the lingering scent of coffee in the air. Sam led her to a chair at the kitchen table before disappearing down a hallway, returning moments later with a clean towel and a basin of water. "You can freshen up while I fix something to eat," he said, placing the items before her. "There's a bedroom down the hall where you can rest afterward. Used to be my mother's room, but she's been gone some years now." Hannah looked up in surprise. "You live here alone?" "Just me and Hank, though he has his own cabin by the barn," Sam replied, moving to the stove where he began stoking the fire. "My father died when I was 15. Mother passed 5 years ago." The simple statement held volumes of unspoken grief that Hannah recognized all too well. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I know how difficult that is." Sam glanced at her, a moment of shared understanding passing between them before he turned his attention back to preparing a meal. "Rest and clean up, Miss Cooper. Food will be ready soon." As Hannah washed the dust and blood from her face and hands, she became acutely aware of her torn and dirty clothing. Her trunk had yielded few salvageable items, and her blue calico dress was in worse shape than ever. Still, it was all she had, so after retreating to the offered bedroom for privacy, she did her best to brush off the dust and straighten her appearance. The meal Sam prepared was simple beans, bacon, and biscuits, but to Hannah's famished state, it might as well have been a feast fit for royalty. As they ate, Sam inquired about the stagecoach attack, his expression growing grim as Hannah recounted what little she could remember. "There's been a gang working this territory for a few months now," he explained. "The law's been after them, but they're slippery. I'll ride out tomorrow morning to check for other survivors before we head to Ventura. Should also let the sheriff know." After the meal, exhaustion claimed Hannah completely. Despite her protests that she could help with the cleaning up, Sam insisted she rest. The bedroom he'd offered was plain but clean, with a comfortable bed covered in a patchwork quilt that spoke of a woman's touch from years past. Hannah barely had time to marvel at the unexpected kindness of this quiet cowboy before sleep claimed her. Morning arrived with the crowing of a rooster and the soft clatter of movement in the kitchen. Hannah awakened disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous day came rushing back. Her body ached from the crash and subsequent ordeal, but a night's rest had restored some of her strength. Rising from the bed, Hannah smoothed her wrinkled dress as best she could, wincing at the new tears she discovered in the fabric. She would need to mend it yet again before presenting herself in Ventura. In the kitchen, she found Sam already dressed for riding, a pot of coffee brewing on the stove. He looked up as she entered, his expression warming slightly. "Good morning," he greeted her. "Sleep well." "Better than I expected," Hannah admitted. "Thank you again for your hospitality." Sam nodded, pouring her a cup of coffee. "I'll ride out to the crash site now. Should be back by midday, and then we can head to Ventura. Help yourself to whatever you need." After he departed, Hannah took stock of her situation. Most of her belongings had been lost or damaged in the crash, and what little remained would hardly be sufficient for beginning her new life. Still, she was alive, which was more than could be said for her fellow passengers. With determination born of necessity, Hannah found needle and thread in a small sewing basket and set about mending her blue calico dress yet again. She had just finished when Sam returned around noon, his expression somber. "No survivors," he confirmed, removing his hat as he entered the kitchen. "I buried them as best I could and marked the graves. Sheriff Tanner from Ventura will send men out to investigate." Hannah closed her eyes briefly, a prayer for the souls of her fellow travelers passing through her mind. "Thank you for doing that," she said softly. Sam's gaze fell to the dress in her lap, the numerous patches and mended tears now forming a patchwork of their own across the once fine fabric. "Is that all you have?" he asked. Hannah nodded, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "Most of my things were lost or ruined in the crash. This was my mother's handiwork. I was hoping to arrive presentably." Sam disappeared into his bedroom, returning moments later with a simple but clean cotton dress in a soft shade of brown. "This was my mother's," he explained, holding it out to her. "She was tall like you. Might need taking in, but it's whole at least." Overwhelmed by the gesture, Hannah accepted the garment with trembling hands. "I couldn't possibly, it's just gathering dust," Sam cut her off, his tone matter of fact though his eyes betrayed a hint of emotion. "Better it gets some use." Too moved to argue, Hannah retreated to the bedroom to change. The dress was indeed a bit large, but with a few strategic pins, she managed to make it presentable. The simple cotton was of good quality, the color flattering to her fair complexion, and bringing out the golden highlights in her blonde hair. When she emerged, Sam was loading her salvaged belongings into a wagon hitched to two sturdy mules. He glanced up as she approached, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes that made Hannah's heart skip a beat. "Much better," he said simply, offering a hand to help her onto the wagon's seat. The journey to Ventura took the remainder of the day, the wagon moving at a steady pace across the rugged terrain. As they traveled, Sam pointed out landmarks and shared bits of information about the area, his deep voice painting a picture of the land he clearly loved. Hannah found herself drawn to his quiet strength and understated kindness. Unlike the smooth, talking gentleman she had known back east, Sam's words were few but meaningful, his actions speaking volumes about his character. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the small settlement of Ventura came into view. It was larger than Hannah had expected, with a main street lined with businesses and homes spreading outward in a rough grid. The Pacific Ocean glimmered in the distance, its vastness both intimidating and exhilarating to Hannah's landlocked eyes. "Where can I take you?" Sam asked as they entered the town proper. "Mrs. Fletcher's home," Hannah replied, suddenly nervous about meeting her father's cousin and beginning her new position. I believe it's near the schoolhouse. Sam nodded, guiding the wagon down the main street until they reached a neat white house set back from the road. A gray-haired woman was tending to flowers in the front garden, looking up as the wagon approached. "Mrs. Fletcher," Sam called out, bringing the wagon to a halt. The woman straightened, shading her eyes against the setting sun. "Yes." "I've brought Hannah Cooper," Sam explained, jumping down from the wagon to help Hannah descend. "There was trouble with the stagecoach. Robbery." Abigail Fletcher hurried forward, her face creased with concern as she took in Hannah's appearance. "My dear girl, we expected you yesterday." "I was about to send word to the sheriff." Hannah managed a smile despite her weariness. "I'm afraid I lost most of my belongings, Mrs. Fletcher. If not for Mr. Everett's assistance, I might not have made it here at all." Mrs. Fletcher turned her attention to Sam, who stood awkwardly holding Hannah's meager bundle of salvaged items. "Samuel Everett," she acknowledged with a nod. "Haven't seen you in town for some time." "Madam," Sam returned the greeting. "I don't make it in often." "Well, I'm grateful you were there to help my cousin," Mrs. Fletcher said, taking Hannah's arm. "Come inside, dear. You must be exhausted." Hannah turned to Sam, suddenly reluctant to part from the man who had saved her life. "I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Everett." Sam shifted uncomfortably under her grateful gaze. "No need for thanks, Miss Cooper, just doing what anyone would." But they both knew that wasn't true. In this harsh land, not everyone would have stopped for a stranded woman, let alone offered such generous assistance. "Will I see you again?" Hannah asked impulsively, then blushed at her own forwardness. Something softened in Sam's expression. "Town's not that big, Miss Cooper. I reckon our paths might cross." He handed her bundle to Mrs. Fletcher, tipped his hat, and returned to the wagon. With a final nod, he clicked to the mules and drove away. Hannah watched him go, a strange emptiness settling in her chest despite the warm welcome from Mrs. Fletcher. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Hannah settled into her new life in Ventura. The school term was set to begin in a fortnight, giving her time to prepare lessons and meet the families whose children would be under her tutelage. Mrs. Fletcher proved to be a kind if somewhat reserved hostess, providing Hannah with a comfortable room and helping her acquire the necessities she had lost in the robbery. Yet despite the busy days, Hannah found her thoughts often turning to Samuel Everett. She had seen no sign of him since their arrival in Ventura, though she had made discreet inquiries and learned that his ranch, the Double E, was respected in the community even if its owner rarely participated in town affairs. It was during her third week in Ventura, while shopping for fabric to make a new dress, that Hannah caught sight of a familiar tall figure emerging from the mercantile. Her heart quickened as she recognized Sam, dressed in clean but worn ranch clothes, loading supplies into a wagon. Before she could decide whether to approach him, Sam looked up and their eyes met across the dusty street. For a moment, he seemed frozen in place, then he touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement and crossed toward her. "Miss Cooper," he greeted her, his voice as deep and steady as she remembered. "You're looking well." Hannah smiled, absurdly pleased that he had approached her. "As are you, Mr. Everett. I was beginning to think you'd vanished." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Ranch keeps me busy." "How are you settling in?" "Quite well, thank you," Hannah replied. "The school term begins next week. I've been preparing." Sam nodded, his eyes noting the parcels in her arms. "Replacing what was lost, trying to," Hannah admitted. "I've saved the blue dress, though. I can't seem to part with it despite its condition." An awkward silence fell between them, broken when Sam cleared his throat. "I should let you get back to your errands." "Actually," Hannah said quickly, "I was just finished. Would you? That is, might I offer to buy you a cup of coffee?" "As a small token of my gratitude." Sam hesitated, and for a moment Hannah feared he would refuse. Then he nodded. "There's a decent cafe just down the street." The cafe was a small, clean establishment with checkered tablecloths and the rich aroma of coffee and baked goods filling the air. As they took seats near the window, Hannah was acutely aware of the curious glances from other patrons. A young, unmarried schoolteacher taking coffee with the reclusive rancher was evidently noteworthy in Ventura's social circles. "You've caused quite a stir," Sam observed dryly as he poured cream into his coffee. Hannah raised an eyebrow. "I believe you're equally responsible for that, Mr. Everett, Sam," he reminded her. "And I suppose I am. Don't make a habit of socializing in town." "Why is that?" Hannah asked, genuinely curious about this man who had shown such kindness, yet seemed to keep the world at arm's length. Sam considered her question, taking a sip of his coffee before answering. "Prefer the quiet of the ranch, I suppose. Town has too many expectations. And too many eligible young ladies with matrimonial aspirations." Hannah suggested with a small smile, recalling the appreciative glances several women had cast in Sam's direction. To her surprise, a flush of color appeared beneath his tan. "That too," he admitted. Hannah found herself charmed by his discomfort. For all his capability and strength, Samuel Everett was endearingly awkward when it came to social niceties. "Well, I assure you my intentions are purely grateful," Hannah said, enjoying the rare opportunity to tease him. "Though I do still have your mother's dress. I should return it. Keep it," Sam said immediately. "Suits you better than it would anyone else." The simple compliment, delivered with such straightforward sincerity, warmed Hannah more than she cared to admit. "Thank you," she said softly. "I've been wearing it to meet the school board and parents. Makes a better impression than my poor blue calico." "Still holding on to that, are you?" Sam asked, his expression unreadable. Hannah nodded. "It was the last thing my mother made for me. I know it's foolish, but I keep mending it, hoping somehow to preserve that connection." Sam's eyes softened with understanding. "Not foolish at all," he said quietly. "Some things are worth holding on to, no matter how damaged." Their conversation turned to lighter topics: the upcoming school term, the peculiarities of Ventura's citizens that Hannah was quickly learning, the progress of Sam's ranch. By the time they finished their coffee, Hannah felt as though she had known him far longer than their brief acquaintance warranted. As they stepped back onto the street, Sam paused. "I'd be happy to show you the ranch sometime if you'd like. On a Sunday, perhaps, when you're not teaching." The invitation, delivered with such careful casualness, made Hannah smile. "I'd like that very much," she replied. A week later, Hannah stood before a classroom of 20 children ranging in age from 6 to 16. Her nerves hidden behind a composed exterior as she introduced herself as their new teacher. The schoolhouse was a simple one-room building, but well constructed and equipped with adequate supplies, a testament to Ventura's commitment to education. As the days passed, Hannah found herself settling into a routine. Mornings and afternoons were devoted to teaching, evenings to grading papers and preparing lessons, with occasional social gatherings organized by Mrs. Fletcher to introduce her to Ventura society. Through it all, she kept the blue calico dress, unable to discard it despite its increasingly dilapidated state. Each evening, she would take it out and mend another tear or reinforce a worn seam, the familiar motion of needle and thread connecting her to memories of her mother and the home she had left behind. When Sunday arrived, Hannah found herself uncharacteristically nervous as she prepared for Sam's promised visit. She chose to wear the brown dress he had given her, now properly altered to fit her slender frame, and tied her blonde hair back with a simple ribbon. Mrs. Fletcher observed her preparations with knowing eyes but made no comment beyond a gentle reminder to be home before dark, for propriety's sake. Sam arrived precisely at noon, driving a smart buggy rather than the work wagon he had used previously. He had made an effort with his appearance as well. Hannah noted with pleasure his usually windswept dark hair was neatly combed, and he wore a clean shirt and vest beneath his customary leather jacket. "You look lovely," he said simply, as he helped her into the buggy. The drive to the Double E Ranch took them through rolling countryside, dotted with live oak trees and the occasional glimpse of the distant ocean. As they traveled, Sam pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the area, gradually revealing more of himself in the process. "My father bought this land when I was just a boy," he explained as they approached the ranch. "Came out from Ohio with nothing but determination and my mother's unwavering support, built everything from scratch." "And you've carried on his legacy," Hannah observed. Sam nodded, a shadow passing over his features. "Trying to. Lost him too soon mining accident when I was 15. Mother and I kept things going, but it wasn't easy." Hannah's heart ached for the boy he had been, forced to become a man so young. "You've done him proud," she said softly, understanding now why the ranch meant so much to him. The Double E looked different in daylight than it had during Hannah's brief stay. The house and outbuildings were modest but solid, the corrals containing several fine horses, and the surrounding pastures green with early autumn grass. Everything spoke of careful stewardship and hard work. "It's beautiful," Hannah said sincerely as Sam helped her down from the buggy. "It's home," he replied, a note of pride in his voice. The afternoon passed pleasantly as Sam showed her around the property. Hank tipped his hat when they encountered him checking fence lines, his weathered face creasing in what might have been a knowing smile. Two other ranch hands Hannah hadn't met during her previous stay nodded respectfully as Sam introduced them. "Don't usually employ many men," Sam explained as they walked toward a small creek that marked the property's eastern boundary. "Just enough to keep things running smooth. Prefer to do most of the work myself." "That doesn't surprise me," Hannah said with a smile. "You strike me as a man who likes to have his hand in everything." Sam chuckled, a warm sound that Hannah realized she had rarely heard from him. "My mother used to say the same thing. Called me stubborn as the day is long." "Mothers often see us most clearly," Hannah replied, thinking of her own mother's gentle teasing about her perfectionist tendencies. They reached the creek, where a large oak tree provided shade from the afternoon sun. Sam spread a blanket he had brought along, and from a saddlebag produced a simple picnic fresh bread, cheese, sliced apples, and a jar of honey. "This is lovely," Hannah said, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "I didn't expect such a feast." Sam's cheeks colored slightly. "Wasn't sure what you'd like." As they ate, their conversation flowed more easily than ever before, the initial awkwardness between them giving way to comfortable companionship. Hannah found herself sharing stories of her childhood in Missouri, the dreams she had harbored of becoming a teacher, and the devastating loss of her parents that had ultimately led her to Ventura. "You miss it?" Sam asked. "Your home in Missouri?" Hannah considered the question carefully. "I miss what it was when my parents were alive," she finally answered. "But that place doesn't exist anymore. I'm building something new here." Sam nodded, understanding in his blue eyes. "That takes courage." "As does maintaining a ranch alone after losing your family," Hannah replied softly. Their eyes met, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. Hannah became acutely aware of how close they were sitting, of the way the dappled sunlight through the oak leaves played across Sam's strong features, softening them. For a heartbeat, she thought he might lean closer, but instead, He cleared his throat and began gathering the remains of their picnic. "Should probably head back soon. Wouldn't want Mrs. Fletcher questioning your reputation." The moment broken, Hannah helped him pack away the food and fold the blanket, trying to ignore the faint disappointment she felt. The ride back to town was quieter than the journey out, a contemplative silence falling between them. As they neared Mrs. Fletcher's house, Sam finally spoke again. "Would you mind if I called on you again? Maybe next Sunday," the simple request, delivered with such uncertainty from a man who otherwise exuded quiet confidence, made Hannah smile. "I would like that very much," she replied. The following weeks established a pattern. Hannah devoted herself to her teaching during the week, earning the respect of both her students and their parents with her dedication and skill. Sundays became the highlight of her existence, as Sam would arrive promptly at noon to take her on excursions, sometimes to the ranch, other times to explore the coastline or the hills surrounding Ventura. Through these outings, Hannah came to know Samuel Everett beyond the taciturn cowboy who had rescued her that fateful day. She discovered his dry sense of humor, his extensive knowledge of the natural world, his fondness for poetry that he would never admit to anyone else, and his deep-rooted sense of justice. For his part, Sam seemed equally fascinated by Hannah, her quick mind, her compassion for her students, her determination to build a new life from the ashes of her old one, and her quiet strength that matched his own. October gave way to November, and the weather turned cooler, though nothing like the harsh winters Hannah had known in Missouri. On the first Sunday of the month, Sam arrived as usual, but this time with news that changed their routine. "There's a harvest festival in town next weekend," he said as they walked along the beach, the Pacific Ocean stretching endlessly before them. "Thought you might like to attend." Hannah glanced at him in surprise. "With you?" Sam's expression turned uncertain. "Unless you'd rather go with Mrs. Fletcher or some of the other teachers." "No," Hannah said quickly, perhaps too quickly judging by the small smile that tugged at Sam's lips. "I mean, I'd be delighted to attend with you. I'm just surprised. You don't usually favor town gatherings." Sam looked out over the ocean, his profile strong against the horizon. "Maybe I'm changing my ways." The Ventura Harvest Festival was the social event of the season, drawing families from outlying farms and ranches as well as townsfolk. The main street was transformed with decorations of autumn leaves and harvest bounty. Stalls selling food and homemade goods lined the thoroughfare, and a wooden platform had been erected at the town square for dancing. Hannah spent the week leading up to the festival in a state of anticipation, carefully pressing her best dress, the brown one from Sam's mother that she had come to think of as her own, and trying to temper her growing feelings for the quiet rancher who had so unexpectedly entered her life. Mrs. Fletcher, observing Hannah's preparations with knowing eyes, finally spoke up the evening before the festival. "Samuel Everett is a good man," she said as they sat by the fire, Hannah mending yet again the increasingly fragile blue calico dress. "Not one for society, generally speaking." Hannah's fingers stilled on her needlework. "He's been very kind to me." "More than kind, I'd say," Mrs. Fletcher replied with a small smile. "The town's been talking. No one's seen Sam Everett pay such attention to a woman since, well, ever." Heat rose in Hannah's cheeks. "We're friends," she said, though the word felt inadequate for the connection she felt with Sam. Mrs. Fletcher's gaze fell to the tattered blue dress in Hannah's lap. "You're still working on that old thing. It's beyond saving, my dear." "Perhaps," Hannah admitted, fingering the worn fabric. "But it matters to me. Some things we hold on to past their time," Mrs. Fletcher said gently, "and some things we need to let go to make room for new beginnings." Hannah pondered those words as she lay in bed that night, wondering if they applied not just to her mother's dress, but to the grief and uncertainty she had carried with her from Missouri. Was she ready for a new beginning? And did she dare hope that beginning might include Sam? The festival day dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for the outdoor celebration. Sam arrived at Mrs. Fletcher's house in the early afternoon, looking more polished than Hannah had ever seen him, his dark hair neatly combed, his usual work clothes replaced by a tailored jacket and crisp white shirt, though he still wore his characteristic boots. "You look beautiful," he said simply as Hannah joined him on the porch, his blue eyes warming as they took in the sight of her in the brown dress. Her blonde hair arranged in a becoming style with a few tendrils framing her face. "As do you," Hannah replied with a smile, accepting his offered arm as they set off toward the town center. The festival was in full swing when they arrived, the streets crowded with families enjoying the celebrations. Hannah noted the curious glances and whispered comments as she and Sam made their way through the throng. But Sam seemed oblivious, his attention focused solely on ensuring Hannah's enjoyment. They sampled foods from various stalls, admired handicrafts made by local artisans, and watched children participating in harvest games. Sam purchased a delicate carved wooden box from an elderly craftsman, presenting it to Hannah with an almost shy gesture. "For your sewing things," he explained as she opened it, revealing a velvet-lined interior perfect for storing needles, thread, and scissors. "It's beautiful," Hannah said, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Thank you, Sam." As evening approached, lanterns were lit throughout the town square and the local musicians began to play for dancing. Hannah watched couples take to the wooden platform, a wistful expression crossing her face. "Would you like to dance?" Sam asked, surprising her. He had confessed during one of their Sunday outings that dancing was not among his talents. "You don't have to," Hannah assured him. "I'm perfectly content to watch." Sam shook his head, a determined set to his jaw. "I'd like to, with you." And so they joined the dancers, Sam's initial stiffness giving way to a natural rhythm as he guided Hannah through a simple waltz. His hand at her waist was warm and steady, his steps more assured than he had led her to believe. "You're quite good at this for someone who claimed to have 2 left feet," Hannah teased as they moved across the platform. A rare, full smile transformed Sam's face. "Maybe I just needed the right partner." As the night progressed and the music slowed, Sam held her closer, their movements less about proper dancing form and more about the simple pleasure of being near one another. Hannah was acutely aware of every point of contact between them, of the admiring glances from other dancers, and of the perfect rightness she felt in Sam's arms. When the musicians announced the final dance of the evening, Sam led Hannah away from the platform, through the dispersing crowd, and toward a quiet corner of the town square where a large oak tree provided privacy from curious onlookers. "Hannah," he began, his deep voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "I'm not good with words, never have been." Hannah's heart quickened at the serious expression on his face. "You do just fine," she encouraged him softly. Sam took a deep breath, reaching for her hands and holding them gently in his much larger ones. "When I found you on the road that day, I wasn't looking for anything more than to help someone in need. Didn't expect you to become so important to me so quickly." Hannah felt tears pricking at her eyes as Sam continued, his words coming more easily now. "I know you came here for a fresh start, for independence. I respect that. But I find myself hoping there might be room in your new life for me." "Sam," Hannah whispered, her voice catching with emotion. "I'm not asking for promises," he hurried on. "Just a chance to court you properly, to see if what I feel, what I hope you might feel too, could grow into something lasting." In that moment, Hannah knew with perfect clarity that her heart had already decided long before her mind had caught up. The quiet rancher with his hidden depths and steadfast nature had become essential to her happiness. "Yes," she said simply, squeezing his hands. "I would like that very much." The smile that illuminated Sam's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, rare, breathtaking, and warming her to her core. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Hannah responded with all the certainty she felt, her hands moving to rest on his shoulders as the kiss deepened, becoming a promise of all that might lie ahead for them. When they finally parted, Sam rested his forehead against hers, his voice a low murmur. "I should take you home before Mrs. Fletcher sends out a search party." Hannah laughed softly, reluctant to break the spell of the moment but aware of the proprieties that must be observed. "Yes, I suppose you should." As they walked back to Mrs. Fletcher's house, Sam kept Hannah's hand tucked securely in the crook of his arm, occasional glances passing between them filled with new understanding and shared joy. At the garden gate, Sam kissed her once more, briefly but with unmistakable tenderness. "Until Sunday?" he asked. "Until Sunday," Hannah confirmed with a smile that remained long after she had entered the house and retired to her room. The winter months in Ventura passed in a blur of teaching, Sunday outings, and increasingly frequent evenings spent at Mrs. Fletcher's home, where Sam would join them for dinner and conversation by the fire. As Christmas approached, Hannah found herself happier than she had been since before her parents' illness, her heart full with her growing feelings for Sam and the life she was building in Ventura. One Sunday in early December, as they rode along a coastal trail, Sam broached a subject that had been on both their minds. "Christmas is coming," he observed, guiding his horse alongside Hannah's borrowed mare. She had proven to be an accomplished rider, much to Sam's delight, and they often spent their outings on horseback exploring the countryside. "Do you have plans with Mrs. Fletcher?" Hannah nodded. "She's invited some friends for Christmas dinner. She mentioned you were welcome to join us." Sam was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'd like that, but I was hoping you might come to the ranch on Christmas Eve, just us." The invitation held significance that wasn't lost on Hannah. Christmas Eve was for family, for those closest to one's heart. "I'd be honored," she said softly. Christmas Eve at the Double E Ranch was everything Hannah could have hoped for. Sam had decorated the house with simple but beautiful touches: pine boughs on the mantel, red ribbons on the doors, and a small tree adorned with ornaments that, he explained, had been his mother's treasures. They shared a meal that Sam admitted he had had considerable help with from a rancher's wife who lived nearby, and exchanged gifts by the fire. Sam presented Hannah with a beautiful leather-bound journal, the pages empty and waiting for the stories of her new life to fill them. Hannah's gift to Sam was a hand-knitted scarf in deep blue that matched his eyes, made during the evening hours after her teaching duties were done. "To keep you warm on those early morning rides," she explained as he wrapped it around his neck with obvious pleasure. As the evening grew late and the fire burned low, Sam took Hannah's hand, his expression serious. "There's something I want to show you," he said, leading her to his mother's old room, which Hannah had briefly occupied during her first stay at the ranch. The room had been transformed. The simple furnishings had been polished to a gleam, new curtains hung at the windows, and a beautiful quilt adorned the bed. "I've been working on it," Sam explained, watching her reaction carefully. "Thought it needed a woman's touch again." Hannah turned to him, understanding the unspoken message in his actions. "It's lovely, Sam." He took both her hands in his gaze steady and sure. I know it's soon. We've only known each other a few months, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life, Hannah Cooper." Hannah's heart thundered in her chest as Sam continued. "I love you," he said simply. "I want to build a life with you, here if that's what you want, or somewhere else if it's not. The place doesn't matter to me as long as you're there." Tears of joy filled Hannah's eyes. "Oh, Sam, I love you too." Sam's smile was radiant as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Opening it, he revealed a simple but beautiful ring, a delicate gold band set with a small pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained, his voice thick with emotion. "She made me promise to give it only to a woman who filled my heart the way she filled my father's." Kneeling before her, Sam took Hannah's left hand. "Hannah Cooper, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Hannah whispered through her tears. "Yes, with all my heart." As Sam slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to gather her in his arms, Hannah felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. Their kiss was a seal on the promise they had just made, a beginning rather than an ending. Later, as they sat before the fire, Hannah nestled against Sam's side, her head on his shoulder and his arm around her. They spoke of their future when they would marry spring. They decided, after the worst of winter had passed, whether Hannah would continue teaching, for the remainder of the school year at least, and how they would blend their lives together at the Double E. It was nearly midnight when Sam reluctantly drove Hannah back to Mrs. Fletcher's house, both of them reluctant to end their perfect evening, but aware of the proprieties that must be maintained until their wedding. Mrs. Fletcher was waiting up, her knowing smile indicating she had anticipated the outcome of the evening even before Hannah shyly displayed her ring. "Congratulations, my dears," she said warmly, embracing Hannah and offering Sam a rare kiss on the cheek. "I couldn't be happier for you both." The news of their engagement spread quickly through Ventura. Hannah's students were delighted, the girls especially fascinated by her pearl ring and eager to hear details of the proposal. The school board expressed their hope that she would stay on as teacher even after her marriage, to which Hannah agreed, with the provision that she might need to reconsider once children came along. Sam, for his part, found himself more welcome in town than ever before, as though his choice of the beloved new schoolteacher had finally given the community a way to embrace the formerly reclusive rancher. He bore the increased attention with good grace, particularly when it meant accompanying Hannah to social gatherings where he could proudly introduce her as his fiancée. As winter deepened, Hannah continued her habit of working on the blue calico dress in the evenings, though even she had to admit it was becoming a lost cause. The fabric was so worn in places that new tears appeared almost as quickly as she could mend the old ones. One evening in late January, as she sat by the fire in Mrs. Fletcher's parlor carefully stitching a particularly troublesome tear, Sam arrived unexpectedly, shaking snow from his coat as he entered. "Sam," Hannah exclaimed in surprise, rising to greet him. "I wasn't expecting you tonight." "Finished my work early," he explained, pressing a kiss to her cheek before greeting Mrs. Fletcher. "Thought I'd stop by." His eyes fell to the blue dress in Hannah's hands, his expression softening with understanding. "Still working on that, are you?" Hannah sighed, looking down at the tattered garment. "I know it's foolish. It's barely holding together anymore." Sam sat beside her on the sofa, taking the dress from her hands and examining it carefully. The once vibrant blue fabric was faded to a pale shadow of its former color, the countless mends creating a patchwork of stitches across the material. "She was mending the same dress over and over," he said softly, then looked up at Hannah with gentle eyes. "That's beyond repair now." The simple statement, delivered with such compassion, broke something loose inside Hannah. Tears welled in her eyes as she nodded, accepting the truth she had been avoiding for so long. "I know," she whispered. It was hers. The last thing she made for me." Sam set the dress aside and took her hands in his. "Your mother gave you more than a dress, Hannah. She gave you her strength, her kindness, her determination. Those things can never wear out or tear." Hannah leaned into him, allowing the tears to fall as Sam held her close, his solid presence a comfort she had come to rely on. Mrs. Fletcher discreetly excused herself, leaving them alone in the parlor. "I've been thinking," Sam said after Hannah's tears had subsided. "The fabric might be beyond saving as a dress, but we could use pieces of it for something else. A quilt square, perhaps, or a keepsake pillow. Something you could keep without having to constantly mend it." Hannah looked up at him, struck once again by the depth of understanding this quiet man possessed. "That's a wonderful idea," she said, touching his cheek gently. "Thank you for understanding." "That's what I'm here for," Sam replied simply, turning his head to press a kiss to her palm. "To understand you, to support you, to love you." In that moment, Hannah knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just a future husband but a true partner, someone who saw her completely, broken pieces and all, and loved her not despite them, but because of the strength it took to carry them. The next day, Hannah carefully cut the least damaged sections from the blue calico dress, setting them aside to be incorporated into their wedding quilt. The act of finally letting go of the garment as it had been was bittersweet, but she found unexpected peace in the decision. As February turned to March, wedding preparations began in earnest. The ceremony would be held at the small church in Ventura, with a celebration afterward at the Double E Ranch. Hannah had ordered a simple but elegant wedding dress from San Francisco, and Mrs. Fletcher was helping with the other details. Sam, meanwhile, had been making improvements to the ranch house, adding a larger kitchen and a second bedroom for the future. He had said with a meaningful smile that made Hannah blush with anticipation. Their wedding day dawned clear and mild, the California spring bringing wildflowers to the hills around Ventura, and a sense of renewal that perfectly matched Hannah's mood. Mrs. Fletcher helped her dress and arranged her hair, securing a crown of small white flowers atop her golden curls. "Your parents would be so proud of you," Mrs. Fletcher said, blinking back tears as she stepped back to admire her handiwork. "You've built a beautiful new life here, with a lot of help," Hannah replied, embracing the older woman who had become so dear to her. "Thank you for everything." The church was filled with well-wishers, Hannah's students and their families, townspeople who had welcomed her into their community, and the ranch hands from the Double E who stood awkwardly in their Sunday best, hats in hand. But Hannah saw none of them as she walked down the aisle on the arm of Sheriff Tanner, who had kindly offered to give her away. Her eyes were fixed on Sam, standing tall and handsome at the altar, his blue eyes shining with love as he watched her approach. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt, their vows spoken clearly for all to hear. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Sam's kiss was tender and reverent, a promise of all the years to come. The celebration at the ranch lasted well into the evening, with dancing and feasting and much good-natured teasing of the formerly reclusive rancher who had been captured by the pretty schoolteacher. Through it all, Sam kept Hannah close, his hand often finding hers as if reassuring himself that she was truly his at last. As the last guests departed and twilight settled over the Double E, Sam led his new wife onto the porch of what was now their home. Together they watched the stars appear in the darkening sky, Hannah nestled against her husband's chest, his arms secure around her. "Happy?" Sam asked softly, pressing a kiss to her hair. Hannah tilted her face up to his, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "Perfectly," she replied. I never imagined when I stepped onto that stagecoach that I was traveling toward not just a new job, but a new heart. Sam's smile was tender as he bent to kiss her. And I never imagined when I found a bedraggled woman on the trail that I was finding the other half of my soul. That night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, the barriers of propriety finally removed, Hannah discovered new depths to Sam's tenderness and strength. Their love, already profound, was sealed in the most intimate way, their bodies expressing what words could never fully capture. Spring blossomed into summer, and Hannah completed the school year while settling into her role as mistress of the Double E. She discovered a natural aptitude for ranch life, her organizational skills and quick mind complementing Sam's practical experience in ways that made the operation even more successful. By autumn, the quilt Hannah had been working on was complete, with squares of the blue calico dress integrated among new fabrics in a pattern that symbolized her journey from loss to new beginnings, from solitude to partnership. And when the first snows of winter dusted the hills around Ventura, Hannah shared with Sam the news they had been hoping for come summer. The Double E would welcome a new generation. Their son, James Samuel Everett, was born on a warm July evening in 1878, his lusty cries announcing his arrival to the world. Sam, who had paced anxiously outside the bedroom during Hannah's labor, was overcome with emotion when the midwife finally allowed him to enter and see his wife and newborn child. "He's perfect," Sam whispered, carefully taking the swaddled infant from Hannah's arms, awe and love transforming his features, just like his mother. Hannah watched through tired but happy eyes as her husband held their son, marveling at how complete her life had become in just 2 short years. From the desperate young woman on a dusty trail with nothing but a tattered dress and fading hopes, she had transformed into a beloved wife, respected teacher, and now mother. As the years passed, the Double E prospered under their joint care. James was joined by a sister, Elizabeth Grace, in 1880, and another brother, Thomas William, in 1883. The ranch expanded. The house grew to accommodate their increasing family, and Hannah eventually retired from teaching to devote herself to raising their children and helping Sam manage the ranch. On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Sam presented Hannah with a small wooden box, the same one he had bought for her at the Harvest Festival when they were courting. "Open it," he urged when Hannah looked at him questioningly. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a brooch fashioned from her mother's thimble, polished to a high shine and set with a small pearl that matched her wedding ring. "How did you?" Hannah began, tears filling her eyes. "Found it among your sewing things," Sam explained. "Thought it deserved to be treasured, just like the woman who taught you to sew in the first place." Hannah pinned the brooch to her dress with trembling fingers, then reached for her husband's hand. "You continue to surprise me, Samuel Everett," she said softly, "even after all these years." Sam's smile was as warm as the day he had proposed. "Planning to keep doing that for at least another 50, he promised, drawing her close for a kiss that held all the passion of their youth and all the depth of their shared life. From the yard, their children's laughter rose like music on the evening air, the sweetest sound in the world to both of them. The Double E had become more than a ranch. It was the heart of a family, a legacy built on love that had begun with a chance encounter on a dusty trail. Hannah often thought of that day, of the tattered blue dress she had stubbornly tried to save, and of the cowboy whose simple observation had contained more wisdom than he knew. That's beyond repair now. Some things couldn't be mended, it was true. But sometimes, when you finally let go of what was broken beyond repair, You made room for something new and even more beautiful to take its place. As twilight deepened around them and the first stars appeared in the sky, Hannah leaned her head on Sam's shoulder, perfectly content in the knowledge that what they had built together, their love, their family, their life, was stronger than any fabric, more precious than any heirloom, and would endure long after they were gone. In the end, it wasn't the things you mended that mattered most. It was the hearts you touched, the lives you changed, and the love you created that formed the true legacy of a life well lived. And by that measure, Hannah and Samuel Everett were the richest people in all of Ventura County.